sadly, every family will experience a medical emergency at one point. And how you handle that, it's tough. If you wait until that medical emergency happens, then you have all these emotions, and that's understandable, and you make rash, maybe the incorrect decision. We're going to talk now to Michelle Butler, who is with Tupper Butler Law. She joins us once again. And Michelle, I know you're a very accomplished attorney. I've looked at your resume. It is amazing.
Thank you.
But I think it's important to point out, for this type of law, a personal experience, to me, is very beneficial. You've been through it. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, unfortunately, I have learned the hard way the importance of this kind of planning. About 3 years ago, my father fell alone in his home, just tripped, but the way he landed resulted in a spinal cord injury that left him a quadriplegic. No one plans for the kind of injury that we faced, and no one plans for the trauma that would accompany the need for planning for medical care, planning financial security, and how to continue attempting a normal life.
Yeah, as well educated as you are, Michelle, this was hard for you. I mean, you're an attorney, you're accustomed to difficult situations, but when it's personal, it is different. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of getting in front of it, of doing something now. And in fact, folks have a little bit of extra time, you know, with this coronavirus and pandemic, and sometimes you can do some positive things with that time. This would be one of them, wouldn't it?
It would, and I always encourage my clients and other people who are interested to imagine the avoidance of speaking about these kinds of things with their family. All that does is actually delay the difficulty that the people they love the most will face. We faced my father's injury without any kind of plan in place. We had absolutely no idea what he wanted. And even though I had been practicing litigation for almost 15 years, I had no idea what he needed and how to help him as an advocate.
So at Tupper Butler Law, and by the way, the Tupper is in honor of your father. I think that's worthy of mentioning here. And you can tell your relationship is very close, as we all have with our parents. So let's talk a little bit about what you cover, because there's a lot of moving parts here when something like this happens. So what do you cover at your law firm?
Yes, all of my packages and planning strategies include multiple documents. One is to address what you wish to have happen with your property, which comes in the form of a will or a trust. There's also discussion and security of your finances through designation of a power of attorney for your financial matters. Unlike other kinds of powers of attorney, I go through all sorts of potential scenarios to ensure that the person you decide to manage your finances has adequate instructions to follow exactly what your wishes are. There's also a couple of ways to preserve your health care decisions. Many people do not anticipate an injury that may not be life-threatening, but would still require a significant amount of difficult decisions, as we faced with my father's spinal cord injury and the kind of surgery that he needed. I got very lucky. My brother and I, my only sibling, we were on the same page and had no difficulty in trying to piece together what he would want in that emergency room. But unfortunately, most of the conflict that happens between family members does not come after the parent or loved one passes away, but actually in the hospital where there's an injury and different family members have different ideas about what that person would want. The healthcare preservation and a healthcare proxy ensures that whoever is the person you designate to stand in that role for you, if you are incapacitated, will know what decisions that you would make were you able to, and also, most significantly, relieves that person of the very, very difficult decision in a vacuum.
And I think that what you've said there tells me that it's important to have that conversation now. What would mom, what would dad want? Unfortunately, we all die. We don't live forever, so those decisions eventually have to be made. But there's another part of me that understands procrastinating. It's not a topic that's easy to talk about. So let me give you a scenario, if you don't mind, Michelle, because of your experience. Okay, so mom or dad they're in their, let's say they're in their 80s, and they're doing fine right now. but you want to have a conversation with them. You want to start setting up their will. What would they want? What are their wishes? Talk to me about how you would approach that situation, because this is much more than just law. This is something that is very personal, and as I said, you've lived it. So how do you approach mom or dad about, hey, we've got to sit down and have this very serious conversation?
That is exactly how to approach these very difficult questions. And I am able to offer my own experience in how I approached the questions for my father. Again, we were very lucky he survived, and we had to confront these questions that none of us wanted to have to address. My mother passed away from breast cancer when I was 9 years old, and you would think, as an attorney and being raised by a single parent, that we would have quickly tried to put something together, but in fact it actually made it more difficult, because who wants to talk to the people they love about not being here? So I actually have different materials and suggestions, and I work with each family situation. I know that different people have different relationships, and their families have different expectations. So I help, after a more in-depth conversation, to plan how to approach the family members that the potential client wants to approach, and give them some talking points to help guide that conversation. Always, I highlight the fact that if, these are decisions that will have to be made at some point regardless. The best time to make the decisions is when a person is still able to make those decisions and convey what they are. Otherwise, you have the people that you most wanted to protect in the most traumatic scenario trying to make decisions without having any knowledge of what you would want.
Yeah, and regardless of your education, your intelligence level, when things get emotional, decisions do become hard to make. It's hard to keep focused. It's hard to have a clear head. You've seen this many, many times.
Well, and I experienced it. My dad's fall was completely shocking. And the prospect of his potential death in the ICU, accompanied with not having any idea what he would say if he were there, in the context of my own shock and potential loss, it was very, very difficult to navigate. And I do not want other people to experience that same just hopeless and overwhelming feeling. I know it all too well. I have a passion for this work because I don't want other people to experience it, and it is the one entirely preventable scenario that we have, because unfortunately we all know that we are not immortal. So it is the single issue in our life that we can plan for and make sure that we have taken the burden off of the people that we most want to protect. I also find that the difference in anxiety level, having put a plan in place, is immeasurable. My father sadly passed away at the end of February. The biggest difference between his fall and the time that he ultimately passed is that I had no second doubts, no questions or potential guilt, because my brother and I, knew we were following exactly what he would want us to do. We were able to just be his kids with him.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to have that conversation, to get in front of it, to be proactive, and now may be a good time to make those critical decisions that are eventually going to come anyway, and you want to do them with a clear head. I noticed when we listed your services and what you offer, expanded living will. I'm a novice, it may be elementary, but exactly what is that?
Yes, so most living wills that people are familiar with, where the healthcare proxy gives instructions to the person you decide to make decisions for you in any scenario, the living will is a direction to the doctor in a situation that might be life-threatening. Most people are aware of a living will that might be a sheet of paper with a few different boxes to check whether you would want CPR or ventilation or artificial nutrition. What my approach involves, it allows a second bite at the apple, as we say. where someone may want to be able to try a ventilator, but if there are no changes after a certain number of days, then they would want to be let go. In my situation, for example, my father was willing to, if necessary, have another ventilator that resulted in a tracheotomy, which he had initially, but he did not want to have one if it prevented his ability to talk. And that is not the kind of thing that would ever appear in a general or generic form that you might receive at the doctor's office.
This is a lot of really good information. I encourage you to call for an appointment today with Michelle Butler. Okay, Michelle, for those who think, well, you know what, I can go online, I'll Google. For those who'd like to try that method, why a professional like yourself?
Well, the forms that you might find online are as generic as possible to appeal to the most common denominator in the largest population. There's very little ability to specify your own personal priorities, what your unique family makeup might be, and how you may want to proceed in different situations. One of the benefits that I try to provide people who talk to me is the ability to imagine certain situations that may be more difficult or less difficult that will not appear in any of the more generic forms online. I also, I work with young families who are putting together an initial plan maybe for their children and are not quite ready to think about sort of aging and long-term care needs or catastrophic injury, but there is a need to address very difficult questions about the spouse or the child. I mean, spouses are not mind readers, and so
That's right.
even though you may have a spouse you think will make the decisions for you, again, it becomes a difficult burden, and without any instruction, and the living wills that are expanded that I do provide those added instructions and enable doctors to try more than one approach.
I would encourage you to call today. Tupper Butler. It is a tough conversation, so we're going to lighten it up a little bit. It's obvious family means a lot to you with the story we've heard about your father. Your son Silas is in the studio. I know we didn't plan this, but yeah, let's bring Silas out. This is one handsome individual. Look how handsome this young man is. Does he practice law as well? Because he certainly looks very handsome in that tie.
He is my motivator. One of the things that I want to protect him from is ever having to face some of the questions that my brother and I did. And he's very bright and very energetic. About to enter the 2nd grade, which is hard to believe, but I want to protect him as well and make sure that all of the hard work that I'm doing will benefit him in the long term and protect his future the best that I can.
All right, Silas, let me use that tie one day. That's a handsome tie. Continued success to you and to your mother again.
Thank you so much.
Tupper Butler Law, I do encourage you. It is a tough conversation, but it's something that will really relieve a lot of anxiety for you and your entire family. As you can see, a different kind of law firm. All right, coming up here.